6:37 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dan Mandis here, present and accounted for, along with Joan Jones. Matthew Hurtt is joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. Good morning, Matthew. I hope you are doing well, and I trust that you had a fine Christmas. Let's get to the business at hand, the death of Jimmy Carter. Now, he's 100 years old, and one of the things that I've noticed is that the media kind of glossing over, and I don't know what's appropriate. Joan and I were talking about this earlier. I mean, we're not 24 hours into the death of Jimmy Carter, but I mean, his presidency was a train wreck. I don't think there's any other way to describe his presidency, but I think that was softened by his post-presidential life, which was perfection.
Dan, I think that most Americans can agree that Jimmy Carter was a statesman. His service in the Georgia legislature through the governorship and into the presidency, I believe that he came from a generation of Americans who believed in America's greatness. Now, that did not play out very well in his presidency. But as you've said, in his post-presidential life, he stepped up further to do what Americans believe is right in the civic space, what we think is important to do outside of government, helping build homes for Habitat for Humanity, engaged in other nonprofit and charitable efforts. And that's fantastic. More Americans should engage in that kind of activity. And we can be grateful for former President Carter's service, and we can wish his family well, and we can take a critical eye to some of the outcomes of his presidential administration. But, my thoughts and prayers today are with the Carter family and the people of Georgia who he served for a long time.
One of the interesting things, Jimmy Carter and Joe Biden have something in common. Jimmy Carter, his one term in office didn't go well, and that led us to Ronald Reagan. Joe Biden didn't go well, one term in office, and that leads us to Donald Trump. So, in other words, it seems to me like those two have that in common, and also the fact that both Joe Biden and Jimmy Carter, I think Biden was worse than Carter, clearly, at least in my opinion, but they seem to have a couple of things in common. They both led to what I believe will be as far as Donald Trump goes, a really good second term in office. And Jimmy Carter led us to, all that Ronald Reagan entailed, including the Reagan Revolution.
Dan, you make an excellent point. Carter did bring us 8 years of Reagan, and Joe Biden is going to bring us, or is bringing us, at least 4 years of Donald Trump and whatever comes next from the America First and Make America Great Again movement. But we could also say, Dan, that on the way out, and with all due respect to President Carter and Joe Biden, both operating on about the same mental capacity in the waning days of this administration.
I guess when you talk about, and we'll shift to Joe Biden here, I found it interesting. There was a panel on CNN. In fact, I'm going to play it. Can I get some audio here? Where a woman named Karen Finney, she's a Democrat, and she doesn't want to talk about the failures of Joe Biden. They're talking about already the legacy of Joe Biden in his 4 years in office. And this is what Karen Finney had to say.
Look, I think in the longer term, we will remember that this is a president and vice president who helped us come back from the brink during COVID, when people were dying by the hundreds of thousands on a daily basis, and we were in our homes, and companies and small businesses were falling off a cliff. And he helped to get vaccines, get us out of our homes, get us back to work.
I'm listening to that, and first of all, we're already headed back to work. That's number one. Number two, the vaccines were already manufactured by Donald Trump. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing is another debate for another time. But I could just tell that the Democrats on this panel were really having a hard time coming up with anything good that we've seen out of Biden in the last 4 years. Now, 6:45 Nashville's Morning News. As far as your weather for today, cloudy but no rain and a high of 60 degrees. Appreciate you listening to Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7. Matthew Hurtt, our grassroots political analyst, is joining us. And Matthew, I did find it funny. Now, for people who don't know, Bakari Sellers is a Democrat operative, right? He's on CNN. He's a panelist on CNN, and you had Scott Jennings and many millions of other people saying that Joe Biden's administration, especially the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental acuity, is a disgrace and a national scandal. And this was Bakari Sellers' answer to that.
I think leaving in disgrace is when you have an insurrection at the Capitol. Like, that's leaving in disgrace. Being impeached twice is leaving in disgrace. So that's a difference. I
got to ask Matthew Hurtt, is this like the new "you're a racist"? Where it's like, if they don't have any answer to the accusations that are being made about the Biden administration, they're just going to throw up January 6th as like a Hail Mary?
2 points here, Dan. The first point is all I wanted for Christmas was 10 more Scott Jennings on national television. He has been a fantastic spokesman for the Trump campaign and conservative principles on national TV. The second point here is we saw in the lead up to the election on MSNBC that the American people did not care about what happened on January 6th at the Capitol. That thousands of people who showed up at the Capitol were, in fact, peaceful protesters. Were there some bad actors? Yes. Is it very clear that some of the folks in the crowd were somehow connected to federal law enforcement? Yes. I do not think that most Americans who are trying to make the mortgage, who are trying to save for retirement, who are trying to put their kids in schools that don't brainwash them with left-wing ideology, do not care about the events of January 6th, and we want to move forward to make America great. And so this is a desperate Democrat talking point that works on stage at CNN and MSNBC, and it does not play out in any American household in this country.
Let me ask, so a couple of things, just random, maybe not connected questions, but Speaker of the House. Mike Johnson, of course, he is in for, I believe, a political fight. Some people are saying that he will be the Speaker of the House. Others saying not so much. He's got a lot of defections already amongst the Republicans in the House of Representatives. What do you think is going to happen there?
Dan, you mentioned something like this in the last segment where the Republican Party plays out these policy disagreements fairly publicly. The Republican Party is the only party in the United States that tolerates ideological diversity, and sometimes that plays out in process elections in Washington. I've been out of Washington for about 2 weeks. It's been fantastic to get out of the swamp. I haven't followed much of the speaker's race. I suspect, whatever happens in the first couple of weeks in January, we'll have a leadership that is nominally aligned with Donald Trump, but it is going to take grassroots activists to stay engaged and involved. And we have seen that over the last few weeks on a number of policy conversations that have taken place on social media and in the headlines, that the first step was reelecting Donald Trump. The second step for people who voted for Donald Trump in November is to make sure that our elected leaders are listening to us. And that means calls, emails, letters, and showing up at political events. And so I'm not sure what's going to happen in January on this, but I am confident that the American people are now clued in and plugged in on important policy things like this in D.C.
One of the things I find interesting is that we're talking about earlier the Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, and they're all fighting over the H-1B visa controversy. What I find interesting, though, Trump seems to be in a somewhat of a precarious position because he's got his supporters, by and large, that are against H-1B visas, but you've got his inner circle, which is Vivek, Elon Musk, David Sachs, where they are for these H-1B visas. And so Trump is sort of in the middle between the millions of people that supported him who are against it and the people who helped him get elected that are for these visas. So it's going to be interesting to watch Trump as he tries to navigate this.
Dan, I think that some of the elements of this conversation, is there fraud in the system? Yes. I know personally, anecdotally, that there are bad actors, particularly in India, who file thousands and thousands of visa requests in this lottery process. But I can also tell you that H-1B visa holders, many of them are highly skilled and qualified, and they go largely into the tech sector. And just from the data that I have access to, these are by and large not people who are being severely undercut in their salaries. There are a number of facts and figures that are being thrown out. I'm a little skeptical about some of the hardline opposition to H-1B visas, but I'm also skeptical of the throw open the doors and let everyone in. There's clearly fraud and abuse. But some of this narrative is, once folks move to the country, and they get a taste of what the American dream is, we know that first generation, second generation Americans very quickly acclimate to American culture, and in fact, oftentimes become even more pro-oriented toward the Constitution and the American dream than many others.
All right, Matthew Hurtt, always great to have you on. It is 6:51 on Nashville's Morning News. Joan Jones has the news running late. What's coming up at 7?
Well, he was the oldest living president. The nation bids farewell to former President Jimmy Carter. Also, an Ohio teacher visited Nashville, and then she got fired from her job. We'll tell you what happened there. Those stories coming up at 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Yeah, learn from this teacher's mistakes.
Yeah.
What a dodo brain. All right, 6:51 on Nashville's Morning News on WTN. Dan Mandis here. Spend time where it matters most this holiday season and sell your home fast with a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. Now, don't worry about showings or open houses or spending money on costly repairs. The guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate allows you to bypass the market, receive an all-cash offer, and close in as little as 21 days. Now, one of their clients, Tom, said Mark Spain Real Estate sold my home quickly and for more money than we expected. The entire process was easy and stress-free. Tom says, I highly recommend Mark Spain Real Estate, and by the way, so do I. Now, if you're looking for a hassle-free experience like Tom's that makes you the most money, my friends at Mark Spain Real Estate make selling your home simple. With over 12,500 five-star reviews, Mark Spain Real Estate knows what matters most, a quick sale and maximum profit. Selling your home is one of the biggest financial decisions you're ever going to make. Do it with Mark Spain Real Estate and sell your home with confidence. 855-299-SOLD, 855-299-SOLD, markspain.com to get a guaranteed offer on your home today and start packing.